Hi, and welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today, February 1st, 2024, we welcome executive producer Chris Wurst from Leo Burnett. Chris started his career in production, working on movies, reality shows, and music videos. And after several years, he moved to the advertising side to Leo Burnett, where he could focus on connecting execution with ideation. He's worked with brands such as Hallmark, Kellogg's, Samsung, and Marlboro. And having served on both production and agency sides, Chris blends a unique perspective of big picture creative and hands-on execution. His work has shaped some of the largest brands of today, and we are excited to have him as a guest. Welcome, Chris. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy. We were joking that this is quite a long time in the making. Lots of emails back and forth of trying to make it happen, and it actually is happening. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I think the last time that we talked about me jumping on, I was actually on the way to the hospital to have my second kid. So,
oh no! Oh my God! I don't know if I remember that. Well, congratulations!
Thank you. Well, I'm on number 3 now. So,
oh my gosh! Oh my gosh! How old are your kids?
So I have 2 that are 2, and then I have 1 that is due in May, likely going to be April, but yeah, so I'm going to have 3 under 3.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we'll definitely have to talk offline because I've got lots of baby questions. So that's amazing. That's really great. I have 3 as well, but they're much older. It's very sweet. Well, I would just love to get started hearing a little bit about your background, where you started and how you ended up at Leo Burnett and what you're doing. You joked earlier that once I get you talking about production, you may not stop. So here is your platform to let us know all about how you got started.
I didn't take the traditional path getting into the ad world. I've been in production for since I was 15 years old. I grew up in a small town that's about an hour south of Chicago, and I actually was a PA on a Tom Hanks movie. They were filming Road to Perdition in my hometown, and I remember always being really curious about filmmaking and just anything involving kind of the production world. And then you see all the big trailers kind of come in to town, and it was mystifying, something that just seemed really kind of larger than life, and it was something that I really wanted to be a part of. So I got in touch with someone that was from our city council to just ask, hey, are they hiring? Are they doing anything? Can I just go shadow, take a look?
Resourceful.
Yeah. And they got me in touch with what I didn't know before. It was one of the production coordinators that was on the job. And they basically kind of said, yeah, we could use someone that I can pay some cash to go make some runs. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. That kind of jump-started my career. Well, not even necessarily my career, more of my interest in it. And then I got really kind of into the industry. My brother at the time, when I was about 16, 17, my brother was doing freelance. He was doing casting for The Real World and not The Real World. It was Big Brother and The Bachelor. They were doing casting there. They weren't actually doing the filming, but they were. It was kind of the first iterations of it. I think The Bachelor was the second season, but they were doing all of this. They were doing the blasting casting from every single city, and I asked if I could come jump along. He was a casting coordinator, I believe, specifically for Chicago, and same thing. I kind of just said, hey, I love doing this stuff. Do you mind if I tag along? That led to, hey, if you're going to be here, why don't we just hire you under the table to do some work for us? Don't tell CBS that. But that's kind of how I got jumped into it. And I realized that I love production. I do not love working in reality TV. It was interesting, but the whole idea of how I originally jumped into it was, it was this kind of mystifying thing. And then working on reality TV, it kind of demystified it for me, where it made it seem like the thing that was supposed to be real wasn't exactly real. And that kind of took the wind out of my sails in terms of really understanding it. So I pivoted a little bit more, and then I started to figure out what are the steps for me to start actually making films. So I would come into Chicago and I would try and find productions that I could jump on where I could do multiple different jobs. And I kind of worked my way up the call sheet, working as, a supervisor, coordinator, production manager. And a lot of these were smaller jobs. They were mostly independent films. And then after a little while, I started getting into the music video world. And that is very much it's a scrappy world to start out in. It was during the time when it was kind of the breakdown of people spending a lot of money on music videos. And they became a little more of a localized thing, and people wanted to produce a lot of different stuff, but everyone wanted to do a music video. So I started line producing a couple of them with local bands that I'd known, and they introduced me to some of their band friends, and then I got linked up into the music world that was kind of in parallel with the production world, which then led me to working at WXRT. I worked there for a semester while I was in college. That was more of an internship kind of thing where I was trying to get school credit while I was also trying to work and network. And from there, I pushed along, and I decided I really wanted to go forward with all of the commercial production world and just being on sets where they're creating content.
And is that when you jumped over to Leo Burnett?
Well, when I jumped over to Leo Burnett, it was around when the market crashed. And there was the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. And from there I was still getting gigs as they were smaller gigs with line producing. And then I was also doing roles where, I was taking anything from a PA job to a coordinator job. And being a 22-year-old kid at the time I was just trying to get a full-time job so that I could have health insurance, and I remember running into one of my old bosses. He was the head of production at the time, Chris Rossiter. I actually ran into him at a soccer training for his son. I played soccer at Loyola, and I did as kind of a side gig. I would do kind of personal training sessions, and then I trained small groups of younger kids that was on the north side, and his son was one of them. We got to talking about what I wanted to do after college and the world that I wanted to be in, and he kind of pushed me a little bit more to, hey, maybe you would be interested in working on the agency side. So I didn't know tons about it outside of the fact that they did this kind of work, and it was ads. They made a lot of commercials and that kind of work. I always kind of associated it with like jingles and stuff. And he kind of pushed me into it. He thought I'd be really good with it. He just thought it was something that sounded a little more up my alley, because one of the big issues that I always had with the production side is I was doing so much work, I wouldn't actually see any of the end product. I would see a lot of, bits and pieces and how the sausage is made, but there's always a point where you would your role would stop, you pass it off, and then it was like, okay, on to the next one.
Well, I was gonna say, and then you're on to the next one, and you're just like so far down the line on the next one, you almost forget, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, nobody's showing me what I produced a couple of weeks ago or a couple months ago.
Yeah, and I always wanted to be kind of the person who is part creative, part executor. So anything in the production world, I'm like most modern creatives today, is anything that I can get my hand on where I'm actually making something personally. I want to try and do it. I want to know software. I want to know cameras. I want to know how to kind of do any and everything that you can. And that was more of a way for me to do it, because it was rooted in ideas rather than just like, hey, this is your role, this is what you got to do.
And how long have you been at Leo Burnett now?
So I have been at Leo Burnett for 15 years now.
Lucky them.
Yeah.
And can you share with us a little bit about what your role is as an executive producer at Leo Burnett?
Right now, I am the executive producer. I'm one of the executive producers of the Altria Group, which is all the tobacco work. So the challenging piece of business, it's a regulated piece of business, but it's also really unique and fun. And the role that I play as an executive producer is a little bit different than kind of your traditional executive producer is. It's because it's such a large piece of business, it's a lot more executional based than I think what most people kind of think of executive producers being more higher level staffing specific stuff and, kind of more big picture conversations with clients. It's all of those things, but it's also executional because my path was a little bit different where, I come from the other side. So I still do a lot, most of the executional stuff that I'm on, but it's also more with the staffing mindset. And it's also more of a figuring out what the larger idea and the larger goal is for our clients from a production standpoint.
And what are you known for on your team?
I guess.
Should I not ask?
I guess it depends on who you ask. I'm known for being someone who'll kind of say it like it is. I'm a pretty blunt person when it comes to, saying what's on my mind. I'm the kind of person where if there's something that I think needs to be said, I'll say it. But I'm also known for being a deeply loyal person. I really, really care about pushing people to, get the things that they want, almost to a fault. It's to the point where I do feel like I have to go above and beyond to make sure that I'm helping people accomplish their stuff, even if it's to the detriment of my own accomplishments, which I don't think is a bad thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that's a bad thing. I feel like sounds like you're really supportive and encouraging to those people around you.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things about me is I really care about the work. It's something that I have a big passion for it. We always kind of talk about what do people want in their work. And I really believe that you have to love what you do. You have to, really make it something that it's a thing that you want to constantly do because we do spend a lot of our time working. So, why not have that be a positive thing?
Well, and I think too, the industry is not getting any easier. It's getting really hard and things are changing. And especially if you've, been in it for a while, you've seen lots of different reiterations of our industry. So you really do have to love it because otherwise, it gets more and more challenging sometimes. And it really has to be the passion that drives you to make it better and to be a part of whatever the next best thing is going to be.
Yeah, you kind of hit on one thing is it is a challenging time, but I think that that's what makes good producers, and that's also one of the reasons that people become producers is we like challenges. We like figuring out how to figure things out. And I think that there's two kind of roads that you can think about it in the industry nowadays is you can think about it as challenging from a negative standpoint where everything feels like a roadblock, or you can think about it as challenging to the point where it's something that gives you a new perspective and it gives you something to try and accomplish.
Absolutely.
I love challenges because I like kind of figuring ways to do kind of the things that other people can't do. It's I think that having challenging things is kind of what makes our industry push forward. I just think there definitely needs to be a part of an education and a reset on what's the difference between challenging and unsustainable.
Yes. We had all of our end of year calls in the month of January with our roster, and the number one overarching theme that I talked about was this idea that I think our industry is in the middle of a seismic shift. And then I kind of talked about what all those different reasons were. But then I ended it with, we can look at that, think about this time, this seismic shift as really scary and frightening and, and just this uncharted territory. Or we can go into 2024 looking for the opportunities and what doors do all of these changes open up and how can we be a part of the future? And, I think as creatives and producers, that's what we're meant for. We have to be evolving, and it's like when the pandemic happened, it was the producers that were out there figuring out how to make sure we could still create content, and keep the industry moving ahead. And I think that's what we're all doing right now. And, it weeds out the people who aren't passionate about it. But I think passion really has to drive all of us to succeed.
Yeah, I think that we are in an interesting time now where I feel that when it comes to the difference between people on the agency side or creatives or producers or really anyone who works at an agency is in the modern ad world is I feel like more and more everyone is being put kind of on the same level and platform and playing field. There's a lot less of the idea that creatives are the creatives and producers are the producers. Is just with the way that kind of modern technology, the way that client demands are, platforms that are being created, is everyone kind of has to figure out how to do multiple different things. And I think that it's really interesting to think that, from the different perspective of me being on the agency production side and then talking with, say, some of your photographers, is I think that it's an interesting thing. I want to almost tell the photographers nowadays is you're part of the creative process. And I think now it's just a matter of figuring out how you become more ingrained in that process and how we all kind of come to the understanding that, at the end of the day, we're all creatives. Let's figure out what makes the most sense from a natural fit.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot more collaboration. And I think the way in which, at least my artists, are engaging or being engaged by people who need them is very different. It used to be that you would just call me for a job, right? Oh, Heather, who do you have? And I would share, and then the conversations would start. Now I might be hearing from a production company, or one of my artists might be hearing from a, CGI company or a special effects company. We might be hearing from a brand direct. But regardless of who we're hearing from, the conversation and the ask is the same. They're looking for collaboration. They're looking for ideas. They're looking for inspiration. And there's a lot more people sitting at the table kind of chiming in on all of that. And it's kind of exciting.
Yeah. I love the way that the direction of the creative world, where it's going. I'm sure we're going to talk about production realities and what some of the downfalls can be. But again, I will still always, put my flag in the ground that regardless, I think that challenges are the fun part about a job.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the projects that you do work on. Are most of the projects, do they tend to be motion forward or just motion, or are they stills and motion? How does that kind of break out for you?
So I think on our piece of business, because we're in an untraditional world where, it's a highly regulated piece of business. So we're not allowed to do things like broadcast. Is we actually have to do both all the time. And I think that that's more of a commonplace thing with any client. Is anytime that money's being spent on creating assets or executing something, it's always thinking about the return on their investment. So we have to figure out ways to get multiple different things constantly. So nowadays it's very rare that I'd be doing any sort of work where we're not doing both motion and still photography.
Yeah, they definitely want value.
Yeah.
So when you're doing a production that has both, which sounds like always, do you tend to call a director first, or do you call a photographer who can also direct, or is there usually a DP? Like how does it break out for you, or does it depend on the project?
It definitely depends on the project. I would say there are some projects where they're more photography focused, where some of the other ones are like, it's a nice to have some motion stuff. But then there's also projects that we do where it's a lot of documentary based stuff, and we're telling stories about people, and the motion portion is kind of the driver of that. I think nowadays, just based on the platform that we have and kind of the stories that we do tell, is we tend to find people who can make things visually interesting. So less rooted in finding directors, more finding people who are beautiful cinematographers, and I kind of put them in the same boat where you'll have people who know how to operate the equipment, but have the same stylistic viewpoints and the stylistic eye. So they're obviously very different, but when it comes to kind of the vision from a visual standpoint, is that tends to be where I look a little bit more, just because a lot of times nowadays there's plenty of creative directors who they're the best directors for their own spots a lot of times, and especially in the docu world, where it's a lot of times it's you're letting your subject matter be the one to kind of tell the story. You just need to guide them in the way that you want to.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I talk to my artists all the time about this idea that people want to work with other artists who are doing inspiring work. And by really exploring their own personal projects more, it will inspire you or your creative director to, tell whatever story that is that they're trying to tell. So I think that's great to hear that that's kind of what you're looking for as well.
Yeah, it's interesting the way that you put that. Is it's more of a reframe of the idea that even though it is work from a standpoint of it's for a client, it is a personal project. I do feel like when creative directors or writers or art directors, when they they're putting their stamp on it, is they do feel like it's their own personal project. And I think letting them take a little more ownership in some of that does lead to a lot of collaboration, which does in turn kind of dictate who the people are that you're kind of looking for. I mean, when I first started, I've definitely had some experiences with some, let's say, old school kinds of directors and photographers, and that stuff doesn't really fly anymore nowadays. It is all about collaboration. And I think that in terms of whether or not I'm looking at a photographer or a cinematographer or director, it really is largely based on like what's the most important thing in that project. And if it's having something that's visually stunning, then there's kind of your answer. If it's really performance based, then there's your answer.
Yeah. I think something that we talked about also in our yearly review call was definitely this idea of collaboration, but more in terms of the encouraging the artists to find someone really unique to collaborate with, somebody unexpected. So and this was to create their own personal projects. So it wasn't looking for a creative director or looking for a stylist. It was, what is it that is important to you? Do you want to collaborate with a chef? Or do you want to collaborate with a painter? Like find somebody else who is doing something really artistic and interesting to you that is at the top of their game like you are, and collaborate with them and see what that turns into. I have no example to give or something. It just was an idea that to be inspired by someone else who is equally passionate about whatever they do seemed like it would be a really interesting way to inspire other people in telling stories differently. They all liked that. So talk to me next year and I will tell you who did it, if anyone. Yeah. But Seemed like a cool idea.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about marketing to you. I'm kind of getting a sense of what appeals to you and what you're looking for, but how do people get your attention? What is it, how are people sharing work with you, and what pops out? Mostly, I would guess your inbox, but how does that work with you?
I guess I don't have the greatest of answers for it. Mainly because I think it's all a timing thing. I am looking for certain things at certain times. And I guess that's more of like a project-based thing. Where I'm looking for a lot of that stuff, I'm always kind of looking for a hidden gem. But in terms of like how people are hitting me up, a lot of times the thing that I think resonates the best is really just conversations. Like I like having kind of the human connection with people and having it be less about work and more about the personality of a person. Typically, whenever you're working with people who are experts in their craft, is that they're capable of kind of doing anything and everything. And then the people who are experts at something really unique, those are the ones that you go specifically looking for. But when it comes to kind of artists who are people who are in a group that is just kind of, filled with a lot of other artists who are all collectively doing amazing things, I think it really comes down to the personality thing. It's about wanting to work with people who are good people, who kind of excite you. And in terms of the way that they're kind of hitting me up about things, it's really more the casual nature. I personally don't mind, a text from a photographer or a cinematographer that I've worked with before, just to kind of say, hey, what's up? Because everyone is so inundated with so much stuff that is going on that I can even personally say is I'm terrible at getting back to people when it comes to like just taking a second to review new work. And a lot of times things get lost in an email, and it really is more to do with like, what's the platform that I'm using the most. And for me, it's, I'm constantly on my phone. So I don't mind that. I like people reminding me that, hey, they're there. Hey, they're doing cool stuff. And even if it's people that I haven't worked with, but I know in passing, there are people who do hit me up with phone calls or with text messages, just kind of saying, hey, I'm here. Now that's not a solicitation for people to just.
You don't want to give your phone number out right now.
But I will tell you is those are the things where I kind of think it's all about just reminding people that you're there and doing it in the platform that they're kind of using the most. So for me, that's via phone.
So what about the person who is new and you haven't met or crossed paths with, that wouldn't casually be able to reach out to you on their phone or something, but really wants you to pay attention to, or not want, of course, everyone wants you to pay attention, but hopes that their work kind of strikes something with you? I would think the most effective way to reach you would be email in that case. I'm assuming you look at the emails, and then if anything kind of stands out to you, do you just kind of make a mental note or maybe bookmark a site or go to their Instagram? Do you follow them then?
Yeah. If there's one thing that I would say is all creative people like to be flattered. And the one that I typically end up doing a double take for is when people will comment on the work that I have been doing or stuff that they've noticed about me, something that's going on in my life or something that has to do with a piece that I just did. And not necessarily just in a general stance, because I do get a lot of people emailing me saying, hey, I really like the work that you did on this, and I actually didn't do that work. It's more just kind of a quick Google of, hey, this person works there. But it's more like that understanding that if someone wants me to take them seriously, then I want them to take me seriously and have an idea of the stuff that I'm doing, because
Wow.
I'll be interested in what you are doing if you understand that, like, I'm out here doing the same thing. It's just in a different way.
Yeah, it's such a great way to reframe that, because I get, like you, get lots of emails all the time and I can't reply to them. I do try. I really do try. But number one is they have to hit me at the right time, right? It just has to be time, like you said, timing. But the other ones, the people who actually are like, oh my God, I saw that you just promoted this, or so-and-so worked on that, or I heard you on that podcast and this part was really interesting. It does cause me to pause, because I'm like, oh, someone's actually like paying attention and engaging somehow with me and what I'm doing out there in the world. And they're taking a second to let me know, as opposed to, hey, look at my work. What do you think? Will you represent me? That's very different. And, not a lot of people do it the first way. And those people I have more time for, because I think, oh, we're kind of in this together. So I want to thank them for, either their kind words or the attention they gave to the podcast, or, whatever they were saying. So that's good. That's a really great way to frame it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we all want to be treated like a human being rather than a business transaction. And I think that there's definitely nothing wrong with being more business focused on it. I just think that it has more the idea that it's taking a second to really take a second with it, rather than a copy and a paste of something and like solely thinking just about business. It's like everyone has their own personalities, and not just trying to mine for work, and more having an understanding that I do think that we could do something together and that it makes sense and it would work. Like, I know that there's plenty of people who I will send personal work to if I ever am freelancing or something. And I'll think to myself, like, wow, the stuff that I'm doing it would be perfect with the stuff that they're doing. And I think that really kind of makes it feel a little bit more intentional. And yeah, it's a better way to get people's attention, I think.
So when you're out there kind of engaging with people who know you or don't know you, and you're looking at work and you're trying to, come up with lists to share with your teams of people to consider, what are you seeing as trends right now? Is there anything that's kind of rising to the top that your team and your client are interested in looking at right now, or things that you're noticing out there?
For a while, it was a lot of this. I don't want to say the term lifestyle, because anything that happens with humans in it is lifestyle.
Yeah, I always say it's a very wide spectrum, that lifestyle category.
Exactly. But I think it's kind of this, like, this authenticity of life, and this vibe of kind of casual, not grunge, but almost like a casual acceptance of the things that people enjoy in life. Like, I see a lot of surf stuff. I see a lot of skateboard stuff. I see a lot of things where people are accepting, they're accepting just kind of the person that they are. And I guess I would classify it as more like reality-based creative. But to the other end of that is there's a lot, like, so much reality-based, but then there's also a lot of like over-the-top fantasy kind of stuff that is just rooted in something that is, not close to being in reality, which I know that both of those things sound kind of counterintuitive of each other, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about in terms of the broad spectrum of stuff that's being served to you. Is you definitely have this wide array of people really like the understanding that something's achievable in creative in the work that they're seeing, but then they also like the escapism of it. So I think that it's very few and far between that I see something that's in the middle of that just kind of like your standard.
Well, I had a conversation with an artist the other day who was making a prediction, which I actually am already seeing happening in 2024, is that we're going to be seeing a bit more real people and real patients and real customers and consumers in advertising because of that spectrum that you just talked about, or that pendulum, where you have like hyper real, overly, fantastical kind of work. And then, which, maybe AI will be, well, not maybe, it is kind of showing up in that area. And then this other, lifestyle-y reality sort of thing, where this prediction, which I thought was interesting because I am starting to get requests for jobs where they're like, we're going to use real patients, which has been around for a while, but also we're going to do, real car owners and real like drivers of, DoorDash or whichever. So it's like people want to focus on and really make sure they're making a statement that this is real. Like this is what's really happening out there. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out throughout the year.
Yeah, I love it. I've always been kind of in support of, people kind of grasping at ideas of things being achievable. And that's really a lot of the work that we do, where, part of the identity of a brand of what you're trying to build is people are trying to build brands where a consumer can see themselves in that brand, and it's kind of like their own identity. And that's why I think there is this spectrum that it's one extreme to the next extreme, where it's like totally real people, but then it has a lot of fantasy, because I think we're trying to break down this idea of what is supposed to be real, or what's being served to us as being like this reality, but it's like an unachievable reality. So, perfections of things that seem like they're normal lifestyle stuff. I think it's a good thing. And yeah, it's fun to, plus, it's also fun to have, real everyday people be the ones that are stars.
Yeah, exactly. Let's celebrate them, or us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about treatments. I'm on the board of the AMA. We're hosting a big treatment webinar tomorrow, just trying to come up with ways to just kind of write some best practices for their industry around treatments. So by the time this airs, the webinar will have already aired. But I'm kind of curious, how you and your team value treatments, and how often do you ask for them? Do your creatives read them? Do you share them with their clients?
Yes. So I love them. I think they're amazing. I think it tells you a lot about the person, and not just from a standpoint of like their creative thinking. It also just tells you about the person, of the way in which they're thinking, and just kind of the attitude that they have towards a job. Is you can see people get really passionate in things, even as they're just kind of like having a first initial call with you about, hey, this is, we want a treatment from you, and this is the direction that I think we're going to go. It's just seeing that excitement that I think is other creative people, they feed off of that. The one thing that I will say, like even just from the very beginning, anytime that I hear people start talking about treatments, is our industry needs to modernize the way that we talk about having treatments. It's getting so overblown what is expected. And when you have people who are doing so much work, putting tons of money and effort into it, and then they don't get a job, it's like, it's just kind of like on to the next one. I actually think our industry should be changing, and they should be putting more restrictions on the idea that, like, as being a part of the 3 people who are going to be bidding on a job is that initially says, okay, well, no matter what, we're at least going to have the treatment be something that's part of a cost that's already baked in. I think that we owe it to the creatives, and we owe it to the talent that are working on this, is that if we want them to take what we're asking for that serious, and we're expecting them to kind of come with this, is we should be showing them the same kind of respect. And by respect is that meaning we're gonna respect their time, and that, comes with a cost, but it also comes with just the understanding that, hey, you're one of the 3 people that we're looking at, and we do value what you're doing, it may or may not work out for this project, but here's how we're going to show that value.
Oh my God, Chris, I knew I liked you. Honestly, this is what we have been pushing for at the AMA for quite a long time. And one of the reasons why we're having this webinar tomorrow with a few art producers is so that, we can take all the information we've gotten from our members, take information from the art producers, take information from the photographers, and we're hearing and we're learning that there are other associations out there that have been doing the same thing and pushing not just, yes, for sure, for pushing for payment. Thank you. I appreciate you being supportive of that. But also just the recognition of how much time and effort and energy and money go into each one of these treatments, and lost time on set, lost time with family, and without the transparency a lot of times around the process and who we're bidding against or how many people are we pitching against, and without having direct access to the client in this situation, and not getting any feedback after the fact, all of these things together have really contributed to a downfall or a reduction in morale in the industry, because these artists there are less and less at bats, right? You don't have as many opportunities as you used to, and you put it all into this treatment. And a lot of times you don't hear back, or you just hear they went with someone else, and there's not a lot of feedback or collaboration. During the process, we're just kind of shared a spec sheet and a quick creative call, and we're expected to go do these huge treatments, like you said, that have gotten so overblown. And I think the expectation management is a bit out of whack too. And I think it's a bit of a broken process. And it can be better because, like you said, when we started, when you first answered my question, you said you love treatments. And I was like, oh my God, yes, they are such an amazing part of the process for what they are supposed to be. And I do hope that all of these associations and our industry clients, agencies and artists and their representatives can really come together and figure out how to fix it, because it's a really important, special part of the process that, as you said, has just gotten a bit overblown.
Yeah, I think that's like in the creative process, one of my favorite parts about it, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, is, the brainstorming session. That is amazing. It's so much fun. It gives you so much energy being a part of that in whatever capacity you're a part of it. That's what a treatment is it's an extension of the brainstorming process. It's just coming from a different perspective, and it's actually taking it one step further, and it's having people take an idea, run with it, and share their perspective. And I also think that regardless is people are doing treatments, and even if they don't get work, that's still influencing the work that does eventually end up happening. And I think that again leads to something that needs to be acknowledged. It needs to be something that's thought of as you're already a part of it, you've made it to a final round of whatever it may be, and you're reaching out to people for a reason. And as you kind of touch base on it a little bit, is people want to get feedback about stuff. And I think that the feedback, it kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that in bringing people into, whether it be a triple bid scenario and they're talking about, hey, these are the 3 people we want to go with, is by changing the way that we think about treatments, is it reframes it as more of an investment. You never want to go into something having some sort of creative person that you have the potential of working with later by leaving them with a bad taste in their mouth and or not wanting to do a job that you want to do. Because let's say they're perfect for something later on, is you want to make sure that you're that the other person wants to work with you, that they know that you're the type of person that is going to at least respect the work that they're doing, because it does not feel great when you put a lot of effort into something and you turn around and it's kind of like being ghosted in a job interview where you just don't hear.
Or a pitch, if an agency's pitching a client, right? Same thing.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with a rep the other day in anticipation of our webinar, and also an art producer, about this. And we talked about how, the initial creative call is more of a bit of a tour of the project. We take you through the website, you take us through the spec sheets, and it's more about kind of hearing what the project is so we can create the estimate, right? And get the accurate amount of costs or around whatever the costs are. How great and then we have to go off and do a treatment based on that. There's no extra conversation. There's no collaboration. It's like in that moment or that hour or half hour that we get, like we're hearing it all kind of for the first time, but there's no, like you said, brainstorming. How great would it be then to have the creatives and the artist have another call? And I know this is wishful thinking in that there's not all the time in the world, but maybe we don't need to bid 3 people at that point, or maybe I'm not sure, but then let's have those brainstorming sessions. And then let's write the treatment from there. And then let me present it. Let's have some more time to really invest. Could you imagine how much further along the project could be if we're actually spending the time needed, instead of the artist just thinking, oh, I hope, okay, here's the shots. Here's what they said the client wants. I hope I get this right. We're all kind of left guessing. And I know there's not a lot of time, and all time is money and all of it. I get it. But it is part of why what we're hoping to achieve up tomorrow in this webinar is to kind of come up with get suggestions from everyone on how to make it better.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, I never ask talent for treatments and don't follow up with them, giving them some sort of an understanding of people's thinking. Now, that's not me saying I call people up and tell them, hey, they're looking for it to have your treatment to have this person as a representation of the talent that they want. It's more me giving them sort of the idea of where I'm deciphering a creative's point of view and mindset as being, because in reality is it's only fair to have people be on the same playing field. And if you're only giving them bits and pieces of what it is that playing field coming up with drastically different ideas, it isn't really the same playing field. It's a whole different thing. So I think that giving talent more context about what's in someone else's head only leads to it being a little bit more fair when it comes to people kind of trying to decipher what people are doing and then how they can move it forward.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such an interesting time. Well, I really, really appreciate that you're thinking about this. And I'm sure it's, you're sharing all your thoughts and points of view with your team, and it's, trickling through your agency. So thank you for that from the entire Artist Management Association and the artists we represent. Well, we should probably start wrapping up. This was amazing and incredible, and so many wonderful insights. I do like to ask everyone the same 2 questions. And I think it's a funny way to, if people are listening all the way through to the end, if they use it as something to reach out to you, they can say that they heard these last 2 things. I'm just always curious, what's your favorite thing to do on a Sunday? And if you weren't a producer, what would you be?
If I wasn't a producer, what would I be? Unemployed.
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. No one's ever said that. That's great. I like that.
I played Division I soccer in college, and I played all since I was really young. I always wanted to be a professional soccer player, but that has more to do with my talent level and where I was able to get it to. I was able to pay for school. So I think I got pretty far with it, but
yeah, that's impressive.
If it wasn't talent based and I could say that, I could achieve that, Yeah, I'd love to be a professional athlete, but more and more nowadays, I love woodworking. I don't know why. It's just relaxing. I like building things. I like creating things, which again kind of just goes back to being a producer in general.
Yeah. I guess once a producer, always you can't not produce something in your life.
Yeah, but I guess the real answer would be a dad. Being a stay-at-home dad would be amazing. I love my kids so much. They're everything for me.
That's sweet.
And then what do I do on a Sunday? Yeah, probably hanging with my kids, doing my dream job.
That's great. Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, this was incredible. Really, really great insight. I can't wait to share it with everyone. And I really am happy that we were persistent with each other and making it happen. It was definitely, for me, worth the wait. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.